How many churches do you think there's been here? Nearly, but you've just gone a little bit beyond. If you go one down, 2. Right. That's the second church there. The first church was here.
Wow.
And what it was, if you look here, there's a few telltale signs.
Was it called Heywood?
It was still called Heywood, and it was 1688 when it was done, and it was Oliver Heywood's church, hence the name Heywood Church. Now, the second thing is, look at this here. This is a plaque telling us a tale about what happened to the second minister. Heywood was the first one, the second one was a chap called Dickinson. And that plaque is on the inside wall of the church. Now, we believe, I mean, if you normally have a plaque there, if you go in any churches, the plaques are up here, aren't they? They're not down there at, well, at ankle level in some places. So we think the church originally was at ground level next to these cottages. So it's at the same level going all the way up. And
So were the cottages built then as well?
They came later, but we think, I think it's going to be at that same level. And it went, I think I've forgotten now what it was. It went kind of a third of the way up the graveyard. If that's all right. I think the third thing you've got to do is, right then, if it was, well, where were the early graves? Right? Because most of the gravestones in here are 1830s and beyond. That was built in 1836, I think, although George keeps saying 1833. Well, one of us is right.
I'm right, Alan.
It's a George if you ask him. So we're looking at what happened to the early graves. Having said that, if you look at one or two of them, this is one here, that says 1758. There's another one there with the flag, that's a 1740. And we think, and I'm wanting to try and get this confirmed if I can, I think there was a layer of graves below these at the level of those cottages and the early church. The only way to do it, I don't know if anybody watched Time Team going back, they had that ground penetrating radar, didn't they, where they could go down and spot things. Actually one of them is at Pratt University. I've been in touch with him on a couple of occasions, but he doesn't follow me up, I'm afraid. But I'd like to find out whether that was the case. I can't understand. It must be the name. So I think, if you want, there's a graveyard on top of a graveyard, if you want. The ones here, and that one there isn't interesting. And I just wonder, that goes back to 1740, but it's for a lady called Hannah Clay. Her husband was John Clay. And anybody that knows Northowram, there's a clay house on here, just opposite the Shoulder Mutton pub. And the Clays there were well-to-do people, wealthy people, going back into the 1700s. And I think it was the father-in-law of the lady there, Clay. He was a well-known associate of Heywood. So you just wonder whether power, influence, money, they've taken that stone out from down there and put it up again, you know, at a high level. There's a few of those like that. And so you almost wonder whether this has made a difference as to whether you're down there or whether you're up here. I could be wrong, I might be totally misreading that, but who knows. Another one which is in the same category is, I don't see the flag. Can you see the flag? So just don't, you're not picking up, are you? If you go around there, you might be able to see the flag. Can you see the flag? That's another one into the 1700s, and it's in Latin. And it's as far as I'm aware, it's the only gravestone that's in Latin, and it's for the third minister. Again, influential, potentially, I guess, a chap called Hesketh. If anybody's good on the Latin, you can have a look at it and translate it for us. Okay. So, you've got this is the old graveyard, and there could be an even older one underneath. Who knows? Right, we'll move on if we may. Just watch yourselves. You've just about seen this flag. I broke this flag, lads. Can you see that flag just there? Let me tell you about the Butterworths. That's the grave of Isaac Butterworth, and I'm sorry I've forgotten his wife's name. They had 5 children, including twins, which I think I haven't come across another set of twins in Heywood yet, I'm sure. Oh sorry, I have, yes, one more. Anyway, the twins are recorded in the censuses back in the 1860s, 1870s as being in the workhouse, I'm afraid, and they're recorded as being imbeciles, which I think suggests that if you want, they had some sort of mental problems, I guess. Anyway, Mum and Dad, they died when the 2 youngest, 2 boys, were still under 10. The 2 boys went to live with their eldest sister, but they also attended the school in Northowram, and it was the school at that time, or one of them, was the Con Club, the Conservative Club. That was one of the, if you want, the main place, but they could go there as orphans, and because they had free places for orphans, and so that the lads knew it as the orphan school. And we'll come back to that just in a minute, because the 2 lads then, when they got into adults, young adults in the early 20s, they then emigrated to New Zealand, became successful sheep farmers, and about 10 years after they'd gone there, the eldest brother Isaac, father and son were called the same, I hasten to add, Isaac wrote back to either family or friends, I'm not quite sure, and said, can you find me a wife? Which you do, you know, on a regular basis, I guess. Anyway, a suitable lady was found, Emma Brearley, and Emma went across to New Zealand, married Isaac, and lived happily ever after, as far as we're aware. No children, and the other brother didn't have any children either. And Isaac was the last one to be living, and when he died, I think it was about 1910, just before the First World War, he left £2,000 to this place, which I think probably around about £120,000 equivalent of today, a huge, huge sum, and £1,000 to the Northowram Orphan School. Now the problem was, in the 1870s, there was the National Education Act, and the Con Club school closed, and everybody moved across the road actually to that new building. But the trustees were still around for the orphan school, because they still had money coming in from investments and so forth, and they used to make grants out to people, and they put their bid in and said, look, it's us, that's, you know, and actually went to the courts in New Zealand, and the courts in New Zealand said, yes, you're right, you can have your £1,000. And the beauty for me with that one is the first awards, and there were 2 awards made. One of them went to my great aunt, educational award of sorts, which was nice. So that's the Butterworths. It's a shortened version, I hasten to add. Believe it or not. Now then, you'll like this. Just come here and I'll show you something. If you look through those gates, you'll be able to see something. It's a run down. Can you see there? Look at there. Can you see what that building is? It's all falling down. I'll tell you what it is in a minute. Yes, well, yeah, that was the reason why they took it over, unfortunately. Right folks, just over the wall for the lads' benefit is the shed that the monumental mason used when he was doing some of the stones that go into the graveyard at the front, at the back rather than the front. It was a chap called Wright that had that, and actually if you look on some of the headstones, well at the bottom you will see names, and those are the masons that produce the stonework. This one says Wade, W. Wade, but you'll come across some with J.H. Wright on, and that's where he did all his stonework there, which was quite handy because imagine trying to cart these things around. Oh yeah, there's another one there, isn't it? I don't know what it says.
Hill.
Is it Haley Hill?
Yes,
That's where. Yeah, I don't. Sometimes it's say Rushworth at Northowram or whatever. Now this little spot here is quite a special spot really. But there are no records for it, only word of mouth. And this is where stillborn children and perhaps tiny children, that hadn't survived, perhaps up to one, whatever, were buried. Effectively, it was, I suppose, almost a poor person's plot for, any small child that, didn't survive, I'm afraid. Problem is, we don't know how many. Somebody has told me that they can recall, he thinks it was here, coming in the very early 60s for a burial here, but yeah, he was only a child, so his recollections may not be that great, I don't know. Sorry, no records, nothing, it's only word of mouth if somebody said that. What, that said? No. Oh right, oh well, that's two then. Yeah, that's two. The other thing that I've picked out in the last 2 months is, here, there are 2 plots, and they're called the trustees' graves. And I think what these were for the poor, who couldn't afford a plot or didn't already have a plot. And one of them does have 2 bodies in. One of them's from the almhouses on Arden Road in Halifax, which were I think they were linked to Macintoshes at one time, and those are definitely poor houses. And the other one had a Poor Houses Association workhouse or whatever. So it looks as though those were 2 graves for the poor, but this was 1920s. So, they always raise then further questions, well, what about those before that? Can we find any other trustees' graves? And I don't know. I'll have to keep looking. That's something that I mentioned to you. The other thing, just to say, is there's a flag there for me to remind me. Heywood has 4 War Commission graves like that. The reason every graveyard throughout the country has them is because it's the bodies of service people. I say people because we have a lady as well as 2 gents. The other thing to bear in mind though is that we've come across at least 19 graves, and these are family graves that record information about their own family war dead, that they are buried overseas, not here. And there's quite, well, there's at least 19 of those that talk about, so and so lost at sea or whatever. We'll pick up on one of those in a minute.
Try not to do that because it's short over the video, okay? Right, we'll see you in a little bit. We're going to go around this way. Oh well, we're off in this one.
Have you heard the result yet?
No. We'll see you in a little while.
No. We've got that new centre forward today.
And
Yeah.
I'm here and I've just bought a season ticket.
Oh.
Never mind. Come on then.
You can't hear properly if you do.
This particular grave is the Holsworth. Now then, I don't know how many Halifax people we have here, I suspect most. Who goes to the Westgate Arcade, you know the one?
Yeah.
And has a coffee or whatever down there. Right, that is owned by what's called O&C Estates. The O stands for Oliver, the C stands for Charles. And it's Oliver and Charles Holsworth, and this is their dad. Right, Oliver and Charles are further up there, and it's the descendants, it's a Nicholas I think now that's in charge of the business. Israel started the business off back in the 1860s, I think, something like that. It was a carter, in other words he was a delivery man, but he had a horse and cart. Problem was, his first horse he got died within about space of about 6 months or so. So he had to go back to doing his previous work in the textiles, gather some money together and buy another horse. But from that day onwards then, it's boomed. Just give you a feel, anybody aware of Hebel buses?
Yeah.
The two brothers founded a Hebel Bus Company back in the early 1920s, before they sold it in the late 20s. They also had other many transport operations, haulage.
Jet petrol.
They had jet petrol, absolutely, you're right.
Quite modern, that.
In terms of haulage and so forth, I think it was 1947, either 47 or 48, haulage transport was nationalised. This lot, sons, got, I can't remember now whether it's 3.7 or 4.7 million pounds for the transport businesses that were nationalised. You're talking serious bucks. Bucks. Oliver, I should say, lived on Malden Road. They all started at Shibden, down in Shibden.
But they all come to the church then, Alan. Is that why they're buried here? Because they came to this church?
The Holsworth generally were involved quite a lot, going back in time. And yes, they were. I don't know quite how heavily involved. I get the feeling that Oliver and Charles, it was business, but I might be totally wrong there.
My father always told me that they also lived in the house, which was the doctor's surgery just across from the mutton.
Right, well I didn't know.
Shoulder and mutton.
This was
Across from the shoulder mutton.
Right.
What was the doctor's surgery?
Yes it was, yeah. The
Yeah.
Holsworths lived there.
My dad always told me that Charles and Oliver lived there when he was...
Right, but he could do.
He did know Charles. Charlie Holsworth quite well actually. So.
So this is before they made all the money then?
Oh, when they were lads they lived there, then yeah. Then
They were born at, I think, at Plowroyd.
Yeah.
I think it's Plowroyd down in Sheffield.
He always told me that.
But I mean, the issue obviously at that time, people used to move houses fairly regularly because it's all a renting situation. People didn't own houses. It was the bigwigs, people with money that had houses, and they then rented them off. Sorry, going back to, so yeah, they sold that. I mean, there's still bags and bags of operations. I think they've operated in South Africa.
Yeah.
There's some in Canada. I've actually spoken to Charles's grandson, who's in his 70s, I hasten to add, in Canada during lockdown, and he's given me some nice pictures of things, including a wooden transport wagon with Holsworth Transport on the side, and apparently all 6 grandsons that they had got one of these for Christmas. So there's little, there's little stuff like that.
Nice little